Hey, what's up, YouTube? My name is Dewan Lightfoot. I'm here with Linux architect from the Linux Academy, Ross Brunson.
Hey, all.
How you doing, sir?
Good, man. Really good. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm glad you took the time here at KC DevOps Days to share your knowledge and experience with the audience.
Cool.
So, yesterday you gave a talk about getting started with DevOps. You want to share? Let's start with your background. Who you are. Let's start there first. How you got started with Linux in your career?
Well, you know, our conversation started a little while ago, and I was in the Army, and I did everything. I was originally a missileman, and I got into doing some of the battlefield prediction stuff. They gave us these hardened computers that ran you did all your programming in the Ada language.
Ada language.
Oh yeah, that translated great to the civilian market, I can tell you. Ada Lovelace was awesome, but that language didn't do too well for me. And so that kind of got me used to computers. And you were saying you were in the Air Force.
Correct.
And thank you for your service.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And I spent a lot of time on Air Force bases. And the beautiful thing was the Air Force got all the new computer equipment before we got it, right? You
Sure.
guys.
That's what they say.
That's right. We got cuck beats before we got them and the train and everything. You know, I was like, doggone it. We're driving Jeeps around and you're driving around in Chevys, Blazers, right?
Yeah.
So not that I'm jealous, but so they offered us computer systems, these 286s and 386s.
Right.
Well, our guys were, my first sergeant in particular, we talked about first sergeants, he was a great guy, but his idea of the cutting edge of technology was an IBM Selectric 2 with correct type. Okay, so he didn't know what to do with computers. So we had 3 or 4 286s and 386s laying around, and idle hands of the devil's workshop or whatever, and so we started playing games on them and fooling around with them. And I ended up, we had a commander, my last commander was going to go through a change of command. If you remember change of commands, if everybody hasn't signed for everything properly, the commander gets to pay for years on a bad change of command.
Oh. Yeah.
Well, I was just starting to use this funny database program called DBase. And I figured it out. I'm like, wait a minute, if we print all this stuff out and we use this key field and we associate it this way and that way, maybe we can have everybody sign for everything and then you'll be okay. Well, I got an achievement medal and all kinds of stuff for that one because I cut him down to below $1,000 worth of charges.
Oh, man.
But it was really cool because it was like, oh my God, this software stuff is cool.
Yeah.
I can't just play, Falcon Simulator or whatever. I can do real work.
Right.
So I get out of the service and I got into the IT world and became a sysadmin. But it's like when everybody used to sell web servers, right? You had O'Reilly's home site and all this other stuff. You got to keep going up stack. And at a certain point, being a sysadmin was not enough. I was like, I'm a sysadmin, but what else do I do? And I can't get a job just as a sysadmin because you got to have 3 or 4 other things that you do. Yeah. And I started to get into the world of DevOps because it looked fun and interesting, and the concept of having things that I could create that were effectively non-existent but did real work was like, okay, I love sci-fi, I love all this stuff, let's do it. Oh man, what was I getting myself into? And so my background is coming from the world of being a sysadmin and a trainer and a certification guy into this new world where it's real and things happen, but nothing is something you can put your hands on except for a couple of script files in your Amazon account, or your Google Cloud account or whatever. And it's such an amazing world. Yeah. But like a lot of people, when I go through really hard stuff, I think about how can I make it easier for the next person.
Yeah. That's the goal. Mm-hmm. That's the goal. You learn something, you document it, and you teach it.
You mean like you do? That's right.
I'm not you. I'm not you, but I'm trying.
See, that's that thing. You're documenting. You're adding to the collective knowledge, and I feel like a certain amount of cathartic good comes out of expressing something that you've done, that you've worked really hard for, because there's a certain amount of passion that you get from that, and I like how you express that. I like that. Let me go out there and see what kind of conversations we can have, because that makes people's lives different.
Right. So we're talking about your career and getting started.
Yeah.
My channel is often about the same thing. You gave a great talk about getting started with DevOps. There's a lot of different tools and a lot of different people involved in DevOps. How do you pick a path, and where do you start once you pick that path?
Wow, I'd like to say I did it just right. The first, well, just go with that.
Right,
we'll go with that I hit it right the first time out. No, it's a lot of trial and error, you know, and the old joke is that the amount of equipment that you ruined equals the amount of experience gained. Well, I got a lot of experience with DevOps in that way. And see, I'm not even a coder. I don't write code anymore. Right. I can critique the hell out of somebody else's code. Okay.
But do you have to write code to be in DevOps?
Well, it's that whole argument about, are you really DevOps if you don't write code? But you know, there are a lot of people that write words and do documentation and all that. And if I were to tell some of my documentation people that they don't work in code, I'll get hurt. They do. I mean, they're so much better at using Git and GitHub and, you know, and all those tools.
Control, right.
Yeah, it's really all about, you know, what aspect do you, like a pie, you know, you cut it up, and I work in these 3 areas, but there are 9 other areas.
Right.
And some people work with the stuff across the way, and it was really a journey, and I really am terrible at doing stuff that I don't enjoy or I don't see any benefit out of.
Yeah.
So you got to go for what you like, and you got to try it to see if you like it.
Right.
You know, so keep the ones that you like, and hopefully that, you know, there's a job that comes out of that. But there's so many jobs in DevOps that anybody who says that I'm a DevOps engineer, I'm like, well, yeah, what 3 things were you before you finally got it? You know, what else, how'd you get there? You know, what are the stepping stones? Like that career is on the other side of the creek, and I got to get there from here without, you know, falling in. Yeah. Where do I go in order to get there? And that's kind of the fun part of the journey, is when you looked at that big graphic of all the different stuff. Everybody comes in through a certain path to get there. And some people make a great career out of staying on a certain area that is not traditional, you know, I use code all the time. Right. You know, and the bigger an organization gets, the more stratified or siloed they'll get, right? You got the guys that only deal with certain protocols, right, and the folks who only do a certain kind of documentation. Well, that doesn't happen in a little bitty company, does it? Everybody does everything.
All the hats.
That's right. So it's almost better if you get involved in a smaller company, so you get all everything. Experience, right? Yeah, and then you go to another company and you go, well, I'm going to go get a job because I like this, and this, and I can put up with that. Yeah. You know. So that's really what I did, was to. My own gratification out of it was producing better training, better documentation, better things to help people get onboarded, right, etc. And that was my angle from that. Well, so find your angle.
Yeah, you're doing a great job.
No, it's fun. I'm frustrated stand-up comic, so I like to get up on stage. And when you all don't laugh, it hurts me terribly, but no.
Here's a question. You work at Linux Academy, you teach Linux. My question is, where does Linux fall in DevOps?
Well, it's one of those, if there's legs to the stool, it's one of those big legs to the stool, because I'm starting to encounter people who didn't live through the Linux Windows wars. They take Linux, no offense everybody, but they kind of take it for granted. Yeah. Whereas, you know, we were the crazy people, we were the wild ones, we were the people who believed in open source, and you know, and it was going to kill the software economy, and right, you know, Craig Mundy at Microsoft said it was a cancer, and I was like, man, you know. But then all of a sudden, people started to realize that there were a certain few things that Linux just was the absolute best at. Right. Unix kind of got there, but it had those licenses that kept you from truly having to contribute back. Right. It was when they flipped the thing and said, in order to be able to use Linux and to change it, you have to contribute your changes to the common good. That's the one that did it, and that's all license-based. So, you know, there's my shout-out to RMS Richard Stallman. Right? Okay. But it was those licenses that did it, because Unix didn't have that. What was I said one time, you can be a do-gooder for all kinds of reasons, but having to be a do-gooder because that's the only way you can participate, that's interesting, you know, because I know a lot of companies that have tried to use Linux for their products and they've done something wrong, and then they end up having to contribute whether they wanted to or not. Some of those are some of the best companies in open source because they learned their lesson. I
see. In my career, I was able to go last very long by only knowing Windows.
Okay.
But when I got to the point to where, all right, now it's time to, I guess, level up, as Brothers would say.
Yeah.
Is
Hey, Brothers.
Hey, Brothers. is
he and I were chatting just before we came. So
right.
Good man.
So once I got to that point, I realized that Linux was a skill set that I needed. Linux is a very broad term. I mean,
you mean like DevOps?
Yeah, kind of like DevOps. So where do you suggest somebody start? Because if you say A+, A+ certification, it's like, okay, you learn software.
400 million people got the A+, right?
Right.
Yeah.
In my opinion, I think Linux may be that type of technology moving forward that people need to learn.
Well, I always tell people that there's two types of us, and those who think we can be categorized in as few as two types, and then the rest of us. Sorry, it's an old joke, really old joke. I'll throw out some military old jokes in a minute, but this whole concept of where did you come from, and I came from the world of the military. I was already using like CPM and DOS and stuff like that, and so Unix to me was like, oh, it's like DOS, only the slashes go the other way and there's no drives.
Right.
And well, okay. For me, it was really what could I do with it?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, it was that I could do so much with it, I fell in love with it and thought, oh, wow, this is really cool. Yeah. But like a lot of people, the old joke is that Apple will go after the early educational market. And then once you get out of school using Apple computers, then you go to college where everybody used the Unix boxes. And then that really messed you up, and then from there you went to business, and they're like, forget all that crap, we use Windows. You know what I mean? So yeah. Having a certain amount of mental flexibility about, oh, I'm going to use this now.
Right.
And really, I tell people, I say, when you have to learn a new operating system, think of it as, and this is for you for your networking terms, a router table in your head. I used to do this on the wall for Windows people coming into Linux, was like, here's how we do these things. You've got so much stuff in common. I got users, I got groups, I got permissions, I got file systems, I got drives, I got processors, and all these things that are similar. Well, why fight it? Just start matching up. Oh, users work this way in there. A UID, well, there's the same concept in Windows, only you don't see it very often.
Right.
And share permissions and all that stuff. All of a sudden, they would just like cross the Rubicon there and go, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
VI was a good place for that. People were like, can you translate this into Windows for me? I'm like, yeah, well, this is file save as. This is, file open. I mean, once you start putting that stuff together, it becomes so much easier. And when you learn one, then you can learn more.
I want to salute you because that's how I know you're a great instructor. Because
you're too kind.
No, I'm serious. You don't find many people that can take and make an analogy of another technology to break it down to something simple where the common user can explain it, or the common learner can understand it. Okay, that's relatable.
So I was talking about this with my little brother who's 16 years my younger. And so that means that everything that I've been through about 16 years ago, he's going through now.
Right.
His daughter is 6, mine is 16. So,
wow.
Like I've been through it and it doesn't hurt so bad, and now it's even funny.
Yeah.
So he and I were talking about this kind of thing, and I told him, I said, I have yet to have somebody tell me that I'm truly wrong with this analogy, and that is that good, well-meaning people tend to make things less complex and easier to understand and follow. People, and I don't want to say evil, but people who don't think about doing that and don't think about other people doing things tend to make things more complex.
Yeah, I agree.
And when you have had to explain things so many times and experiment yourself with stuff that doesn't work, after a while, they're like, I arrived at these explanations because there was no other way that consistently helped people to do it. Yeah. So it's really, I'm a toothpaste tube. It just keep rolling. And I got one thing, but it does it, So, but I think it also helps if you have respect and a degree of brotherly love for your fellow man, because you want to see people succeed. And there is nothing better than having somebody who's been through a class or gone to a presentation or whatever come up and say, hey man, I got it. Yeah. I like that. And you're just like, tell me again. I'm having a hard day. But that's very kind of you. I appreciate that.
No problem, man. Like I said, you went through when you broke down DevOps yesterday and how to get started, you went through everything from Git to networking to every piece of. Yeah. That was a great slide. If we can take that presentation, it'll be in the description of this video if I can get a hold of it. If you're looking to get started in DevOps, I highly suggest you watch that video. And then, if you can, check him out on Linux Academy, because I'm telling you, the way he broke that down, if you're looking to get started, it's some great information. So, thank you.
Man, you're out there doing some seriously good work by helping folks get where they need to go.
I really enjoy it, man. Yeah. I really enjoy it. It's been a blessing to have this platform, meet people like you, come to events like this.
Oh, absolutely. Same feeling here, because, and you know, I like to think that we're all kind of working on a common good. It's like a great big project, you know, get the new folks in, get them trained up right, you know, and then when we're out there on the porch talking about back when I was a sysadmin, and they're busy working and doing stuff. But if you have kids, you get that. You know, when your kid starts to do something great and you're like, oh, that's so much fun. You can get that as an instructor or somebody who helps other people, right?
I got a question before we go. What's the worst outage you ever caused in your career?
Oh, man. May not seem like much, but I had the awful distinction of, we were supposed to, it was back in the network days and early Network 4, and we discovered that the best way to make sure the servers worked for an entire week was to reboot them once a week.
That was a thing.
Absolutely. I came up with the analogy of, I said, you know, rebooting your server is like brushing your teeth, and our servers are going to be minty fresh all week long. And so I accidentally shut down the wrong server because the system boxes looked a lot like the drive array boxes, and I turned off a drive array instead of a system. And I caused Medtronic to lose a week's worth of work.
Oh, man.
That's the heart valve company, folks. It was bad.
A week's worth?
Yeah. Yeah,
it was bad. Where did you feel the pain at?
Oh, I got to. Well, I felt it right away because I'm like, that did not sound like all those drives spinning down was like, that was not a system. Uh-oh. That was bad. And I started checking and I was like, that's sinking feeling. So I did the right thing and I just went and called my boss and said, dude, I screwed up. Here's what I did. And he said, well, I'm glad you told me. Let's go work on it. And I didn't lose my job or anything, but I did become the poster child for let's mark these systems clearly. So I like to say that I contributed a little blood to the eventual cure that was there, but it was bad. I mean, I felt like, I don't know how much monetary value they put on that, but it was a rush project, and they were writing their files as I was shutting it down catastrophically. So I can tell you, folks, in the talk, don't be the subject of that memo. I have been the subject of that memo. The one that warns everybody else not to do that stupid thing. Now I'm a verb. You got Ross.
You got Ross.
Oh, man.
Question though. DevOps is one of the pieces of DevOps is the no blame culture.
I'd say that's a goal, not necessarily
that's a goal,
an implementation. That's something to shoot for. Yeah. Well, and the thing is that unfortunately, let's not call it blame.
Okay.
Let's call it responsibility. Because it is a very responsible culture. I mean, you cannot deny that your team has responsibility for X, Y, and Z. And, people kind of take that no blame thing a little too far. I think we just talk about responsibility and that makes it easier. Because if you have not fulfilled your responsibility, that's not blame. It just puts the responsibility where it ought to lay.
That's true. Man.
How was that?
That was a good story.
Oh, the best ones are the ones you live through.
Yes, and that's how you grow.
That's right. Well, if you learn, right? Only if you learn. And I think I was telling somebody today, I always like to ask people when they give a presentation all the time, what version of your presentation are you on? And if they look at me and go, version? I'm like, okay, we're not going to get along all that well, because if you learn, you make versions of your presentation and you make it better every time. You continuously learn. And that can become a lifelong habit. And it really ought to, right?
DevOps, continuous learning.
That's right.
Yes,
It ought to be.
Yeah. Hey, Ross, I thank you for coming
Thanks
on.
for having me on, man. This is great. I love what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
And thanks for coming to DevOps KC. This is my hometown, and coming here and working with these folks. I mark this. This is one of the best run conferences I have seen in a very long time.
It was a good time.
DevOps KC folks, nice job.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave his talk here at KC DevOps in the description, along with his link at Linux Academy and any other.
You can hit rossbrunson.com. I just throw a little stuff out there.
I'll leave that as well. I thank you all for viewing. We'll catch you on the next one. Peace.